everyone, if you watch my channel on any sort of regular basis, you know that I normally talk about movies, TV, Star Wars, comic book movies, a bunch of fun subjects that I love to talk about with you down in the comments section. But this video is not about anything nearly as much fun as all of that. It's actually quite personal. It's about some struggles that I've had in my life. As of today, I have been sober for 2 years, from about 2012 until 2016. For about 3.5 years, I had a very serious but secret struggle with alcohol that really tore my life and my family apart and pulled my wife through the ringer through the process. And I've debated making this video for quite a while for the obvious reasons of it's not fun to talk about. It's not fun to admit to the faults that I've had, and always have these fears. Will people unsubscribe? Will they think less of me? But really, that's the reason to post the video. When it comes to the internet and social media, it's so easy to filter what people know about us. And so we end up just presenting what we want to be true of us and presenting a better version of ourselves than it's real. Whether it's intentionally trying to mislead people into thinking we're better than we are, or just by default, by omission, presenting ourselves as better than we are by not talking about the negative things in our life. And that has the negative effect of when we look at other people on social media, we think they have it a lot more together than they have. And we see essentially their highlight reel. And then we compare that to everything we know about ourselves. And we look at our behind the scenes, we look at our blooper reel, and it doesn't compare well. And I think it would be a lot healthier if all of us could be a lot more honest about the struggles that we have and what we've gone through. And so I kind of felt compelled to share my story a little bit, because I know that some people watching this, whether they've had the same struggle exactly as me with alcohol or with something else, they need to know that they're not alone. They need to know that I don't have it all together, that I've gone through a whole lot of things and put a lot of people through a whole lot because of the struggles that I have had in my life. And I want to choose to do what I can to leverage the platform that I've been given to try and help people that are in the situation that I was in. And this isn't like a change of direction for my channel. This is just a one-shot video because it's 2 years, and that's an extremely big deal for me and my family. And in a lot of ways, my sobriety ties directly back to the starting of this channel. I previously worked in church world and was extraordinarily busy and stressed out in doing that, and tried to launch this like those. If you go back to the beginning of my channel, you can see some old videos I did, and I just didn't have the time to make it work. And then when I decided that I was fed up with my struggles with the lies, the deception, dragging my wife along through my addiction, and decided to seek help. Part of that process was that I resigned from the church that I was at. And so I didn't have a job for 4 months. And in that 4 months of not having a job, just sitting at home during the day, and at nighttime, I was going to outpatient alcoholic or addiction treatment. That's when I started the channel. At the point in time that I started this channel, it was because I didn't have a job, because I'd resigned because of my struggles with alcohol, and was at nighttime going and seeking treatment for that so that I would never fall into that trap again. And so that's really where Sean Chandler talks about came from. And the kind of the crazy thing that I fell into of me even falling into the trap of alcohol is that I grew up with an alcoholic father, and I just saw the damage that it did. And it was a daily thing up until I was about age 10 or 11, when my parents got divorced, of just my dad would come home drunk and all of the insanity that went along with it. And I thought that was normal up until about high school, when I started telling some of the stories to my friends, and it like clicked in my head, this isn't normal, because I'd just grown up in such a dysfunctional home and watching kind of what alcohol had done to my family and to my father in particular. And when I was in high school, he was told by a doctor that if he didn't quit drinking, he wouldn't see me graduate. And so he quit drinking for a little bit, saw me graduate high school. Some things happened. He took up drinking again and died when I was 20 years old. He drank himself to death. And so I'd seen the damage of alcohol, and I had never had a single drink in my life before I was 21 years old, intentionally. I had no interest. I wasn't going to go down that path. And without wanting to go into too many details, because some people that I know in real life watch my channel, I don't want to soil other people's stories, but there's a tragedy that kind of happened involving some people I knew, and someone was trying to cope through this day of what was kind of going on in their family situation. And they came over to my house and brought alcohol when I was, I think, 22 years old, 21, 22 at the time. And like I said, I've never drunk alcohol, and this person was just trying to cope with something really horrible happening with their family, and they wanted to drink with me. That's a pretty good excuse to drink by any estimation. That going through tragedy, hey, we're in a safe environment. I'm over 12. There's like no standard by which this isn't a horribly irresponsible thing to do. That was the first time I drank, and it was in response to tragedy. But I was still very cautious. Like, it's not like I just took up drinking at that moment in time in my life, because I knew this is dangerous. Jump forward, I was at a funeral 6 months later, drank quite a bit, had a good time drinking. And 6 months after that, there was another funeral. It was like, hey, someone died. That's an okay reason to drink. Notice the pattern was my coping mechanism for tragedy was turning to alcohol. And when I was in college and I'd been married for a year, our apartment was broken into, just robbed, cleaned us out, very rough experience to have your home violated like that. And my coping mechanism to that was to drink. So that was the pattern, as I mentioned, of when life gets hard, this is how I get through it. It's not that I was ever like just this partier going to the bars or anything like that. Like I said, a very churchy religious background. So it was never really that. Not that never happened, but that was certainly not what it was. And became a pastor right around that point in time at the church. And so kind of backed off on drinking because it didn't seem like a particularly good idea to be the drunken pastor. But church world's very stressful, and you have to carry the burdens of other people. As you go through life with people, you care about them and you have compassion, and when they hurt, you hurt. And so then that's kind of where on a more regular basis started drinking just a little bit because of the weight of it. And nothing that if anyone saw from the outside, they wouldn't be like, this guy's got a problem. They would just say, okay, that guy has a glass of wine at night or whatever, something fairly normal. And as time kind of passed, there were several different years, 2010, just an enormous amount of tragedy, deaths that were just very sudden happened of family members as well as friends that were way too young. And once again, this is my coping mechanism. And then jump forward to 2012 through 2013, there was an enormous amount of tragedy around me. Teenage suicides that I kind of had to be on the front line on. Both my grandparents died. People in the church died in car accidents. College friends passed away. Just a lot of death in a very short period of time. And it was bad enough that when my grandparents had died, and they were in their 90s, those emotionally didn't affect me very much because it was like they've lived a great full life. And then there were these other 12 deaths that I was right there on the front line, sometimes officiating the funeral. And I just emotionally couldn't handle as much as everything went through. And my coping mechanism was to drink. And when you just kind of are running on empty and you have tragedy after tragedy and you have alcoholic genes, it was a recipe for disaster and very quickly turned into a full-blown alcoholic. And what I mean by full-blown alcoholic, I've had a lot of people over the last couple of years say, oh yeah, I mean, you had a couple beers at nighttime and and so you just wanted to stop doing it. I was like, no, that's not what it was. It wasn't that I had a couple of beers. When I say that I was a full-blown alcoholic, I meant that when I drank, I did not want to stop drinking, and I would keep on drinking as long as I could. And when I wasn't drinking, there was a thirst, a desire in me to start drinking again, a craving all the time. It stopped being about something bad happened, and therefore I'm going to drink. It wasn't, hey, I'm in the mood to. It was just there was an addiction, a true desire that all the time I was thinking about, how can I start to drink again? And people talk about alcohol as a disease, and that language makes a lot of sense of just when it affects you and this thirst kind of takes over, this desire for more, it defies all rationality. And you start doing things you would never do in pursuit of hiding what you're doing. Because no one publicly knew that I had a drinking problem. Most people didn't even know I drank at all. The only two people that really kind of knew what was going on was my mother and my wife. And everyone else kind of didn't really know what was going on, and each of them didn't know fully what was going on because I was trying to hide as much of it as possible because I was an alcoholic. And that comes along with lying and hiding alcohol, hiding how much you're drinking, all these different things. And this, in a sorts, went on for about 3 years. There's windows where I didn't drink in there where I tried to, through willpower, stop drinking. Didn't want people to know what was going on, but I'm going to try and hide this as best I can. And dragging my wife through this whole thing with me as she's like, you should seek help. You've got a problem. If you go and talk to these people, they will listen, they will understand. If you do this, And my pride the whole time told me no. It told me, no, I don't want to lose my reputation. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want people to know my life is out of control. I want to present myself as better than I am. And I want people to view me a specific way. And because of that, it fed kind of this addiction for a very, very long, it's tough to describe just how, like, I think back on it, like the nightmare that I was in, that I kind of put myself in, and then the addiction took over and it took me further down this path and just built this nightmare world kind of around me, and just trying to figure out what you realize is that it messes you up, and it sucks all the joy out of your life because you're trapped in this box of trying to feed this craving inside of you. But then the people around you, my wife in particular and my kids, just facing the consequences of me being this checked out version that's just driven entirely by I need to get alcohol, and all the insanity, broken trust that goes along with that. And it weighs heavily on me constantly that essentially the first 4 years of my son's life and the first 2 years of my daughter's life, that I was kind of checked out in a lot of ways because of how broken I was. And all of my efforts to fix everything were entirely based around me. And so kind of what happened, what changed, that I ended up breaking the cycle and have been totally sober for 2 years. Well, I'm a person of faith, and so I'll talk about it somewhat in faith terms, and that's my story. I would be dishonest if I were to give you a different answer than that. And part of the problem in all of my efforts to fix it before was based entirely around protecting my reputation. I wanted people to see me a specific way, and I didn't want people to know of my issues. And in church world, we talk about the brokenness of mankind and call it sin. All of us have it. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And everyone, every pastor, everyone that's self-righteous person on TV or whatever, all of them, we've all sinned and that's the reason we keep lying. That's the reason wars keep happening. That's the reason that all the ways that society's gotten better, it's still jacked up. And we can't seem to overcome man's inhumanity to man. For all the things we've improved, we're still broken. And one of my pieces for that is that I was dishonest about my drinking, and I was lying, and my pride would not allow me to seek help for a long time. I'm going to fix myself, which is pride in and of itself. And it says in James 4 that God opposes the proud. And that was me. I cared too much. I cared more about my reputation, cared more about my career than I cared about what I was doing to my wife and my kids and myself. In my long-term life potential, knowing I watched my dad die. And I cared more about protecting my reputation than all of this. God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. And so for me, it took kind of having a moment where I realized that I was starting to lose control publicly, and my lies weren't as good as I thought they were. And I had a moment where I'm done with this, and I'm going to lay it all out there. And so I kind of, out of the blue, just up and resigned one day, essentially. And it was a horrible week to do it. It was in the middle of a gigantic church function that I was in charge of leading, and just up and resigned because things were so out of control. And I just wanted to shine light on my sin. And that's where God gives grace into the mix. And it says in Ephesians 3:20 that God can do immeasurably more than we can ask or imagine. Like I said, I'm a person of faith, so I'm going to quote the Bible because that's my belief system. And that it applies in this situation. And in this time of coming clean, shining a light on everything, essentially the last 2 years, I've had almost no cravings for alcohol. It's actually been in a certain, like the process of coming clean, it's so horrible, but it's been fairly easy not to drink in a different sense. And I don't think that's because I'm some great guy that suddenly changed. I think that's because there's a God that transforms people. And for whatever reason, he decided to transform me through that specific moment in time. And why do I say all this? Because I know that some of you guys are struggling with things too. And I don't want you to think I have it all together. I want you to know that I'm a person that has issues too. And your secrets don't define you. Your struggles don't define you. Your biggest regret doesn't define you. Your biggest mistake doesn't define you. And there's hope that things get better. And I was going to say this, seeking help sucks. Admitting you're an alcoholic publicly sucks. Realizing your life is out of control and then telling everyone that sucks. There wasn't one thing in this recovery process that was easy or pleasant. I mean, every single thing about trying to come clean was extraordinarily difficult. And that's because it's possible to go so far down a path that there's no good options. You can go so far down a path that everywhere you look, to go back is unbelievably painful. And to go forward, continue down the path of addiction will kill you. Quite literally, it can kill you. And there's no good options in those moments. And if you spend years building a nightmare around you of heading down a path like I had done with my family, you have to fight your way out of that nightmare. And that's really what, if you want to know what was going on in the background in the early years of starting this channel a couple years ago, that's what was going on in the background. Is just like this fight to kind of restore a lot of things in my life and get back to normal and get back to a place of healthy and a place where my wife could trust me and that I could be the man, the husband, and the father that my family needed me to be. But what I can say is that things get better. Things are so much better than they were before. Just the level of peace in our family. People ask me all the time, how are you able to get so much stuff done on YouTube and post so many videos? And like, I have such a work ethic and you have a full-time job. How do you do all of it? And I think a lot of it comes down to things were so toxic and unhealthy before that just being in a place of being healthy and being able to spend time with my family and be checked in and engaged with them, everything kind of seems pretty easy right now compared to where things were at. And there's just a love for life that comes back to you, and energy and excitement for what can be when you go through all that I went through over the last 5 years. And that drives me to be a better person and work harder. And I mean, I went through a nightmare of several years. And right now I look at where my life is at, and it's like with YouTube things and kind of my dreams and aspirations for this. I went from the nightmare, and it feels right now that like I'm very close to the dream coming true. Like right now I have a full-time job, but maybe YouTube could be a future for me. Like that's a thing that could be a reality. And that came all from a very hard process of rebuilding trust with my wife, humbling myself publicly, admitting my faults. And it was unpleasant. And if you're struggling with something, the process isn't pleasant, but it's worth it. And I want you to know you're not alone. And there's a lot of people out there that look like they have it together like myself. Maybe if you just look at me at the internet, and I don't. I'm very much a work in progress. And here it is. The thing is that your wife is worth surrendering for. Your kids are worth humbling yourself. And for that matter, you are worth it to do what you need to do to pull your life together, whatever that looks like. Anyway, that's all I got for you. As I said, I've been thinking about doing this video for a long time and was afraid to do it, but I think that it's really important that we present who we really are and do what we can to help people that have the same struggles that we've had in the past. And therefore, I wanted to share this with you guys. I hope this helps someone. If it does, or if there's something, if you need to reach out, if you're struggling with something, you can send me messages. There's several different ways you can do that, whether Twitter or Facebook, things like that. And I'll respond to you and do what I can to help. I'm not a counselor. I'm not an expert, but I've got a story and I've been through some things. And so hopefully this helps some of you guys. Next video, we talk about movies. It'll be a lot more fun. Talk to you later.